The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
It's the Best Birth Podcast, where we interview experts that elevate you as you prepare your heart and mind to have the best birth.
Each episode will interview professionals so you are prepared for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Our experts will build your confidence and empower you to trust your intuition throughout your pregnancy.
This audio is taken from videos on YouTube. Watch the entire episodes on YouTube at Birth Made Mindful. Welcome to the Best Birth Podcast. Today on our episode, we're here with McKenzie Mott. She is a birth doula and a bereavement doula. She's here with Forget Me Not.
McKenzie Mott is a birth, postpartum, and bereavement doula. She started out her journey as a pre-med student getting ready to take the MCAT. Looking for more ways to get her resume looking top-notch to apply to different medical schools, she took a doula training at the University of Utah to be a volunteer doula at their hospitals and delivery unit. Through this volunteer experience, school requirements, and recently getting married, she found herself in the wrong career path. The doula midwife world was it. This was her passion. With her career change in mind, she started her path as a birth doula and switched her credentials around graduating with her bachelor's degree in health promotion and education in 2013. For years, she volunteered with a university hospital and took her own birth doula clients. In 2016, she started midwifery school, just about a week surrounding the birth of her first son. After completing the first semester of midwifery school with a 4.0 GPA, she realized school would have to wait until her children were grown. Postpartum became another passion of hers as she grew in motherhood. Then the birth of her second son, Theo, would be another life-changing event. He had multiple heart defects, which she found out at 3 weeks postpartum. He had a successful surgery and was cleared to go home and live a new normal life. Later, when he had turned just 6 months old, he was rushed to the hospital, put on an ECMO, where he spent the last few days of his life. McKenzie is a loving advocate for women. She understands so much about life and about crises, about death, that she wants to share with the world. Her trials have led her to be more compassionate, more thoughtful, and more careful as a mother, as a doula, and as a friend. Life is never the same, and without quality support, life and truly living can be so much more than you ever thought possible. Wow. Your journey has been beautiful and challenging. Would you mind sharing parts of your story?
Sure, yes. Kind of shared kind of an overview of what my story is, but I'll share about Theo for my grief path. So I had my first son in 2016, and he was perfectly healthy and everything. When I had Theo, I was like, okay, well, I'm just not going to do an ultrasound this time for some reason. I just decided not to. And actually, that ended up to be a blessing in disguise because I was able to have a home birth. I was able to keep him home for a few weeks, and he was fine for those few weeks. It was just that his PDA was closing off. And when we found out he had congenital heart defects when he was 3 weeks old, and we rushed him to the hospital, they just realized that his PDA was closing off at that point. So his oxygen levels were first declining at a faster rate, and that he needed to have surgery. So that's when we found that out. So at 3 weeks postpartum, it flipped our world upside down. We had no idea what we should do, where we should go, how we would for doing this, but we were at primaries, and so we're like, they're going to take care of us. And we were there for a few days, and they had his heart surgery scheduled, and I actually canceled his heart surgery because I did not feel comfortable, and it was the weirdest thing because I was like, I don't know why, I just don't feel comfortable with this doctor. And it was okay because later that day after I canceled, this woman came into the hospital, and she's like, someone canceled. My son was able to get in today, and he really needed to get in to get his heart surgery. And so I was like, maybe that's why I canceled. Maybe that's why, because Theo still had time. He didn't have to have it right now. He had the medication to keep his PDA open. And I also had recently found out about Lucille Packard Hospital with 2 main doctors that are there that do his surgery and have done it for 20 plus years. So I was like, I feel way more comfortable trying to get there with a doctor that has done this for 20 years, other than a doctor that has done it 3 or 4 times and succeeded, but I just didn't feel comfortable with that. So we actually got accepted. We almost didn't get accepted to Lucille Packard because of our insurances in Utah mainly. And so we flew to Lucille Packard, same day they accepted us, and we were there for 1.5 weeks or 2. I think it was either 1 or 2 weeks, and then he had his surgery. So they had to schedule out because they had so many. They had like one every single day, at least. And the surgery is 12 to 24 hours. So it was a long surgery. And we were in the NICU for that first few weeks and then had his surgery. And then he had a few setbacks while we were there. He needed to go on like a BiPAP and his lungs weren't performing as well. But then he just cleared up and was able to come home and almost off all of his medications. And there was tons, like I'll have to show like pictures are on my Instagrams and stuff. But there's just medications and beepers and things everywhere. The room was full. So it was amazing that in a few weeks' time, like they can get him off all of those things. And he came home only on like one medication and a feeding tube for a few more weeks because he couldn't have fat in his milk. So I would centrifuge my milk and also give him a fat-free like formula that they had because he would spit up the formula if I didn't mix it with mine. And I had to centrifuge my milk like to get the fat off. This is a lot of work. It was a lot of work, but I did it because like I was pumping and everything and I was getting good milk. I was like, I might as well have him so he can, get chunky and like actually thrive and not just throw up everything. So yeah, he came home, he got off this feeding tube within like 2 weeks and he was pretty much a normal, happy, little baby. We kind of went on some family vacations, like little short ones to a lake and just driving an hour or two away to make sure we were close to the hospital. And we did all of his doctor's appointments and everything. And he did his physical therapy and got cleared on that for his neck and his back. And like, cause he was laying down for so long, he was almost sitting up, just the happiest baby you would ever seen. Like he's smiling and like babbling and kind of kicking balls and just having so much fun. And then August, just a few days before my birthday, we were going to go to our cabin, which is an hour away. And he saw this like goopy eye. So took him to the pediatrician and they fixed that all up. And he was fine and he had the medication. And then on that Friday, when we went to the cabin for my birthday weekend, he just started spitting up that morning, which was very odd. We didn't know why he was spitting up. He hadn't spit up since he'd been off that formula. And so I just didn't really think anything of it because it was just a little spit up. But as we went up to the cabin, he was kind of just acting a little bit more like sickish, and he spit up a few more times. So I took him to bed early with me, and then throughout the night he just kept spitting up closer and closer and more together. So I started getting really worried, and we ended up going to the hospital at 3 a.m. And I left my son, Porter, my first son, with my friends, my sister up at the cabin. And we just drove like as fast as we could down the canyon to primaries, to the ER. And when we got there, they had a whole bunch of doctors on him, just like the first day we got there. I didn't say that in the first day, but 15 to 20 doctors just like right on top, putting him on oxygen, putting him on IVs, putting him on all these things. And we were just like, look, okay, this is bringing us back to that first day where they were so worried and we had no idea. This time we're like, we know why. Except we didn't know why he was having these issues because he was cleared and he was really good. Except for just that pink eye earlier that week. They had, the protocols of maybe putting a breathing tube in. So we agreed to that. And when they put the breathing tube in, he went into cardiac arrest. And they couldn't get him out of cardiac arrest for 15 minutes. And so that's kind of a long time. Usually they do it in about 3 to 10 minutes. And that's good for the brain. But the reason why is they were trying to get ECMO in at the same time as they were doing CPR. And they severed the line up on the top of his neck. So they had to go a little bit lower to put the line in. And it just took longer than they expected. And so we were in the hospital for 5 days. During that 5 days, they were really hopeful. They said, we don't know what his brain is like. We don't know what his organs are like because he's really swollen, but we just want to wait it out because normally, if we wait it out, we can see what happens. And by that fourth day, they were like, it's just not looking good. Like, if he survives through the night and we get him off heparin, then maybe he'll pull out of this. But if we don't get him off the heparin, then his brain will bleed to death. So we were just like, oh, that's not good. So we decided to take him off the heparin, and he made it through the night. So we were just like, okay. We sang to him all night long, and we read books to him, and we kind of took turns taking little naps, me and my husband. And the next morning was my son Porter's birthday, and they came in and told us that his brain function wasn't really there, and that he probably wouldn't survive the day. And I was like, are you kidding me? Can we just do it tomorrow? Or yesterday, not today. It was my son's birthday. But Theo decided that was a special day to share with his brother. So they actually were able to take him off all of his medications around noon. I was able to hold him with my husband in the bed behind me. And we were just kind of cuddling him and watching him. And he was kind of opening his eyes a little bit and closing them. And then at around 3:45 in the afternoon, he looked up at me and he actually opened his eyes. He took a big, deep breath in, and then he just fell into sleep, into dying. It was the most sad and most interesting and heartbreaking but cool moment that I've ever had. I've never had an experience like that. Now that I look back, I'm glad he shares it with his brother, because I feel like it just shows us that maybe it was his time, even though we didn't want it to be.
Mackenzie, this is such a tender story. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I think you're in a really unique position to be a bereavement doula, and that's something that you had chosen far before the births of your children. And so you were able to help parents in welcoming their children, and then you were able to experience this for yourself and now walk with other families. Tell us a little bit about the moments after and how you were able to take this trial and make it a strength for you and your family.
So I started out as a birth doula when I was, in 2012. And bereavement didn't really come up until after Theo died, but I had known about stillbirth day. I don't know if you guys have heard about stillbirth day, but they have a training about stillbirths and infant deaths for doulas. And I knew about them, but I hadn't really looked into it as much, but I knew the things to do in case, your child did die. But in the moment when he did die, I was in that mom brain, that grief brain, where it's really hard to decipher anything. You can't really think, you can't really do. So there's a lot of things that kind of fell through the cracks. And I just wish I would have had a bereavement doula to guide me, to help me and say, this is what I did for my child. This is what I recommend. And so through my grief, I was like, I've got to figure out how to help other families, because I don't want them to fall into these things that they're regrets, that they didn't get a hand and a foot mold, or that they didn't get the lock of hair that they wanted, or that they didn't put something in the casket that they thought that they should have. But having all those resources available, so that I know it's a lot right when they die, because you have only 5 to 10 days, depending on when you decide to bury them. And you can bury them later, but usually it's quite fast. And so it's hard to plan everything and remember all the things. So I just really wanted that for families. And that's kind of where my experience brought me into being a bereavement doula. And I've just recently actually started it, because in my grief, I wasn't quite ready for it until recently.
What other resources are out there for people who are going through something like this?
There's quite a few. It's mostly stuff surrounding death in general, where it's oh, your husband died, or your grandpa or your grandma or your, sibling. And sometimes not even siblings, like siblings and child loss. There's there's a lot of stuff out there for that, but it's not really specific. It's more of like wide encompassing the other types of death as well. But there's Share Parents of Utah, which is infant and child loss, or infant and stillbirths and pregnancy loss. That's what that is. Now there's resources all over the place. And Compassionate Friends helps with all types of different grief, and I think they have groups for different types. And then there's the Sharing Place, which me and my family love. Like, that's for children who have had a grandparent, parent, any death in their family. They need to process that. And then they also have a grief group that same time for for the parents of the kids that are there, so they can process differently, but together in the same hour. And that's really cool because my son has loved it. He's gotten a lot of energy out. They have a volcano room where they can just punch the walls and like kick balls at the walls and hit whatever they want. And it's really nice. And then they also do a bunch of creative activities with the kids to get their grief out and to have them talk about it. So
Is that something that's accessible for an extended amount of time?
yeah, so that one is accessible for as long as you want, as long as your family needs it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And then I have a grief group that I run specifically for heart children. And then I'm also, as soon as the interest comes, I'll have grief groups for different types of chronic illnesses and stuff. So
that
they can have a specific grief group parents need, because I feel like when you have people surrounding you that have been through the same thing, it's a lot more personal.
And is there resources for people who have gone through miscarriage?
I think Share Parents of Utah still does the miscarriage. And then I have had 3 miscarriages, so I kind of want to start one of those up as well. And my grief group is weekly, so it's on Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. I know there are specifics for stillbirths and for miscarriages, but I know a lot of groups on Facebook that are that way, and you can kind of go and just write, because sometimes it's hard to talk about it. And sometimes those Facebook groups are nice to just write it out. But I really think it's also important to talk to families and people and face to face, even if it's over Zoom. That's where I do it, is over Zoom. Because then you're like, I'm not alone. These are other people and they're real and they're here talking to me. And I think that's really important. That's what I started because I needed it more than I thought the other people needed it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start this because I need this at this moment. And when people started coming, they were like, yeah, I need this. I really do. I need to have support in person-ish, from face to face with someone that's been through something similar to me.
And grief is such a complicated emotion. It doesn't just go away automatically. It's not something that you can bury or set aside. You have to continue walking through it and having other people who can be there and support you or give you a hug or let you know that they're still walking through it too. For our friends who are experiencing grief, what do you recommend as their response and what they can do to show their support? I know a lot of times we say the wrong things.
Oh, yeah.
We try to have the right intentions, but what comes out of our mouth is ridiculous and it's not helpful. And, like, especially if someone says, oh, well, it's been a year. Why are you still, why are you? Yeah. Or why aren't you over it? Or some of those questions. And I don't think it's meant to be out of disrespect, but unless you have experienced it, you might not have the same understanding that it's not something that ever goes away.
Yeah, it's not something that ever goes away. That's what I would say, is that grief lasts. It will last my whole life. I know it will, because I even want to celebrate all of his birthdays and milestones, even though he's not here with us. That in my Creative Ways to Grieve, which is where you can find me. I have Creative Ways to Grieve on Instagram. And it just goes through so many things that parents can do to creatively grieve their child and have that space to, I don't know, just feel them surrounding their child, surrounding them, feel them with them, because it's hard going out throughout life when you do have other children, or even if you don't, and people keep asking you, oh, how many kids do you have? I get asked that on a daily basis, maybe 5 times a day now, especially because I'm pregnant. I get asked it all the time. So his death comes up 90% of my day. And so I don't think it could ever go away as long as people ask me how many kids I have, or as long as people ask me how my kids are doing. And so for people to think that it would ever go away, I mean, if you just think about your own children or your own grandfather or your own parents, if they died, if you think about it and say, but I just forget them after a year, I don't think after that you would kind of start to realize I probably wouldn't just forget them after a year and move on with my life. It's hard, though, because when you're not in it, you just don't understand it. And I've just had to realize that when you're not in deep grief from the death of a child or someone really close to you, you just don't understand. And I didn't. I know I didn't before I had Theo, because I had a neighbor whose child died. And I was just devastated for the longest time, but I still didn't understand. When my son died, I was like, holy cow, like this is so much different than I had ever expected, because that love doesn't leave. You always love your children, no matter what, even if they're far away. Like, you want to know what they're doing. You want to be with them, even if they move to a different state. Think of that. Like, if your child moved to a different state, would you just forget about them? Like, no, I think when they're older and they move, you'd still be calling them and seeing how they're doing. So that's the same with a child that has died. It's just, you always want to know about them, and you always want to know where they are and what they're doing, but you can't, which is the hardest part about it. And so I would say for the people that want to know how to talk to grieving parents is that just be gentle and just think about your own children and how you would feel if one of them died today. Like, what would that be like? And that's how you can kind of bring the compassion in, is thinking, what if this child of mine was just gone forever? And then you can come up with better words. I think that's how I would say. There's always not the right words. Like, nobody can say the right words, because some things offend people no matter what you say. Saying something is better than pushing it off and saying nothing at all.
You talk about these ways to remember the child, and a lot of them will come naturally, remembering. Are there some legacy projects that you recommend for people who have lost a loved one, or that you've done yourself to help remember Theo?
Yeah. So there are so many. Like, I haven't shared a ton on my social media yet, because I really am just like really ready to share it and get it out there in the world, because it's so, so important for parents to feel like they are not alone. And I feel like I'm really going to work hard on getting these out. And my favorites are birthdays and holidays, because they come up every year on the same time with everybody. For Theo's birthday, or for birthdays, I just say, like, what would you do for your kids? What would you do for your kids that are alive? And just think about that. And then if you can't do that, how would you like to remember them? Or what is something that was their favorite thing? Your child's favorite thing. Did they like dinosaurs? Did they like rainbows? Did they like unicorns? Did they have a Winnie the Pooh bear stuffed animal, or any type of other stuffed animal that they really liked? And you can create a birthday around that and do. So what my favorite thing is to do like a service project, because then everybody can come and it's like a party, except you're doing service for something else. So what we do every year for Theo's birthday is we go to the Ronald McDonald House in Primary Children. So there's a family room up there that they serve lunch and dinner. And you can sign up and you can serve lunch or dinner and buy all the supplies, and then you cook it there, and then you hand it out to all the families that are there. And my favorite thing is to bring like blankets and different things that families just don't remember to bring with them when they're in crisis. Toys and and blankets and books. And we'd bring a bunch of that stuff with us with the food. So everybody that comes in knows that it's Theo's birthday. We have it kind of decorated for his birthday. And then they get to take gifts home. Instead of giving a gift to Theo, we give gifts to them. So that's my favorite. But there are so many things like surrounding memorial things that you love about your child. You could have a dinosaur party and just have a party. Like, it's okay. You don't have to have the person there. Or you could take photos with your family and include the little Winnie the Pooh. Or, there's just so many different things. I could talk about it for hours. But, and then for holidays like Christmas, and we usually have a stocking up for Theo, and we write letters and put them in the stocking to him. So instead of like Santa or something bringing him presents, we put a present to him, like a gift to him in the stocking, and then we have a family gift that Santa brings for the family. And we also have a family gift that we bring in honor of Theo for the family. So
I love these traditions. It just makes you so happy to know that even though your son's not here on the earth with you, that you're still remembering him and celebrating him and encouraging other parents to do the same.
Yeah.
That's really impactful. And I hope that all of us can find your work so that we can also then join in. I'm guessing that the Ronald McDonald House or houses like that will allow families to come in and serve.
Yeah.
And we can extend ourselves beyond just our immediate families.
Yeah, and I love that too. I think when you serve, like, it just as a pass it forward, like people are like, oh, I want to try it. I want to do that. That sounds like a great idea. And I do invite my family, like extended family and friends, to come with us so they know about it. And yeah, kind of becomes more widespread, and it's cool.
You had mentioned that you wish you would have had a bereavement doula with you. Can you tell us more about the role of a bereavement doula and how they might help in that situation?
What I have learned as I have been grieving and wondering, like, if I had a bereavement doula, what would I have wanted? I would have wanted someone to text me out of the blue and be like, hey, I know you're struggling. I'm a bereavement doula and I would love to help you. And I'd be like, how do you know me? Where did you find me? But it would just be cool to like have that where I'm like, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing right now. I really appreciate some ideas because I have to bury my son in 5 days, or less. I have come up with a list of things that they can do that's so I don't have to talk to them on the phone unless they want to. It's hard because in the first few days after your child dies, you don't really want to talk to someone. Or in the first few days after your child is in critical condition or has a chronic illness, you don't really know what to do. And so it's kind of nice maybe to just have, like, I was thinking like a text of ideas. Just, these are a lot of ideas. Just read through them, take them or leave them. But these are the ideas we have. And if you have any other questions, and I would want to have someone that I could just call and talk to. So that's what I'm doing. I'm offering my services that they can call me and I will text them and they can ask me about their funeral plans. And we can either plan them together on Zoom or on text, or they can just kind of plan themselves. It kind of just depends on their personal preference of what they can do in a moment, because grief is so different for everyone. And I couldn't plan Theo's funeral, and I didn't want him to have a funeral. I wanted him to have a celebration of life. So I actually passed it on to one of my neighbors that I knew how to do parties. And she put it all together. But I told her exactly what I wanted. We had bouncy houses, cotton candy. Like, that's how we did his celebration of life, because I didn't want to go in front of people and just be crying and not know what to say about my 6-month-old who died very suddenly for me, didn't have a lot of time. And I felt like we should celebrate his little sweet life. Like, he was so happy. I want everybody to be happy. I don't want everybody to just come and be bawling the whole time, even though we did. And it was beautiful. We had balloons and face painting and like everything that like a child would love to have at a birthday party or a party. And then my son, because it was his birthday, we sang happy birthday to him and he thought it was all for him, which was really kind of a cool thing. So we kind of brought his birthday in with Theo's celebration of life. It was all about Theo, but Porter thought it was all about him. So it was kind of neat in a way. And so creating a space for either a funeral or a celebration of life is what I really would like to help out with. But if I don't find them till after, then I have my grief groups and different things that they can do while in this grief to process it, to live day to day, to try to get, back and moving at least a little bit every day, and just ideas to take a shower, eat food, like recipes, easy things to make so that you don't have to spend all your energies, just like a doula would do, where at a birth that they would say, I'm here to support you. I want to help you in any personal way that you feel comfortable. And that's what I would want. So I think that's where my bereavement doula comes in, is that I want to tailor it specifically to them and what their needs are.
Wow. I see people go through such hard challenges, and I always see such strength. And many people say, "Oh, I don't feel very strong," but you're making it through life. You're turning bad things into a positive memory. And how do you find that you do that? Is it just a way to cope, or where does that strength come from?
I think it's because, honestly, you need to live life. There's a point where you hit and you're like, okay, I can't just lay in bed all day and die. So I need to start living. And how do I want to create a legacy so that Theo will be proud of me? And that's how I go about life, is how can he be proud of me so that when I see him again, that he'll say, you did a great job, Mom, and I'm so glad that you kept my memory alive and that you lived for me and for my siblings and for our family. Because so many people say, oh, I don't know how you're doing it. It's like, neither do we. We don't know how. We just have to. There's no other choice. I either have to live or I have to die. Either way. Wow.
Is that the same in choosing to have more children? Because I'm just thinking about women who may be paralyzed by a death and not want to move forward that way.
Yeah, I thought I might be paralyzed. The amount of love that I felt for Theo, so I had my first son, Porter, and I loved him. I love him so much. And I still love him. And I'm like, how's my heart going to open up to another child, right? So you think, oh no, how am I going to love my second child as much as I love my first? And when I had him, I was like, oh dear, I don't know if I'm going to love him as much. I hope I do, but I love this kid so much. How's my heart going to open up for this new one? And I just found that my heart opened up so much. And I was so devastated when he had his his heart condition. And I was so devastated, and I was so happy when we got it fixed. And then I was so devastated again when he died. I was like, my heart can open up to that, to my two kids. And it can open up to as many kids as decides to come my way. And if I can be a really good mom, then I'm going to do that for my kids, because they deserve that. And I think kids really deserve to have good moms. And if it's not the path for you, if you don't think that you should have kids, and that's okay too. You don't have to. And I think choosing that is very personal, just like everything else.
You're an amazing example to us, and the compassion that you're able to show to others with the line of work that you already had. It's such a blessing. Thank you for honoring your calling and just for being out there for us. Is there anything else that you would choose to share with our listeners about child loss?
Even if you're not planning on your child dying, it's just so good to know that it's possible, and I don't want you to worry about it. I don't want you to stress that your child will die. But it's just nice to know like that there are options out there. There's bereavement doulas out there. And I'm hoping that there'll be more bereavement doulas out there because I only know of a few. And I'm hoping to maybe in the future even create like a company surrounding like bringing in bereavement doulas and training them. But I think just even like as you prepare for birth, as you prepare for postpartum, prepare for maybe another thing. Like it's not necessary to fret or to fear, but to just say, if this happens, what do I want? Just like birth, if I have to get a cesarean, because people don't necessarily usually want cesareans unless they do want them. But if that happens, what are my plans then? And if this happens, what are my plans then? And just like a few more what ifs so that when you get to that point, you have at least a small plan of who am I going to call? What am I going to do? And how is it going to affect me?
This has been an amazing conversation. And I love that you've been speaking to both sides too, because it's an important thing to keep it on our mind as well. Every week we share a Mom Squad secret. So I'll just share this one from Kristen. She says, heat therapy was a huge relief during labor. A heating pad, a hot shower, or a hot birth tub. If you understand the process your body is experiencing, you can picture it. All these good ways to prepare and to keep in mind the future and what could be.
Mackenzie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We will definitely link to all of your resources and how you're able to support families and then those who are then offering that support. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. We hope you've been elevated and inspired by this week's expert.
Subscribe today so you never miss an episode. And please share our podcast or post on your social media so that other moms and dads-to-be can also have the best birth.
Please note that the information provided is based on the expert's insights and personal experience. It is not intended as medical guidance. Please seek the advice of your medical provider as it applies to your specific condition.